Hello again. Today I'm having a conversation with an Abstractum type, Kasper. So a fellow Abstractum type, since I'm also Abstractum. So you, the viewer, will be able to compare us in terms of appearance and energy. I always hoped I'd be able to interview an Abstractum with a different configuration from mine. And that seems to be the case. I have libidinum and exirium in my configuration. And as we will explore, I think you have urbanum and corpus in your configuration. So the only energy factor we have in common is abstractum, but having it primary still makes us very similar, as we will discover. You posted a comment on my English video on abstractum types about a year ago saying, "Your human types is super interesting. Thanks for sharing. From watching all the videos, I would probably consider myself abstractum." How did you find my channel?
I found your channel from actualize.org.
Uh,
I think many people
yeah, most
find your
people do that.
channel from him. So, yeah, I just started watching your videos and you had the typology, which I thought was very interesting because I've always liked typological stuff like the MBTI, the Enneagram, astrology as well. So I just wanted to look into that and see how I fitted into it. At first, I thought I was a fiducium because that was the first video in the playlist. And then as I started watching, I instantly knew I was abstractum. So yeah.
I don't think you had any videos on your channel at that time when you first made that comment. Is that correct?
If I had videos on my channel,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think I did.
Yeah,
It
because
was like
I
a
looked
year
at your
ago.
I looked at your oldest videos and they were from about a year ago, same time as you made that comment. And because I don't remember, I usually do check people who make comments, check their channel, and very often there's like nothing on it. And if you had something on it, I think I would have remembered because I'm in the process of writing scripts for videos about the configurations of types. And I realized I didn't have a lot of examples of abstractum with corpus in the configuration. So I was looking for more examples, and then I went back to that video and looked at the comments, and I saw a few comments that had that suggested that that identified with abstractum, and you were one of them. And then I looked at your channel, and you had a lot of videos that I hadn't seen. And from watching those videos, I could confirm that you were abstractum. There was nothing else that really stood out. Usually, the abstractum face can sometimes resemble magnitudinum since they are very close. And you also had this. I guess it was a jacket with like camo colors. That also reminded me a bit about magnitudinum, but other than that, there was nothing else that I really considered. And then you said I can't remember what video it what video it was, but I wrote down some stuff. Oh yeah, you said you were studying computer science purely for the money, but actually hates it. And you said just being a consumer is depressing, especially because I don't have any friends really, and the friends that I do have, I don't like hanging out with because they just like to drink and party and just watch TV. It's just not fun hanging with people. And I don't know if it's just because I have low self-esteem or I'm just very insecure, or if I'm just one of those people that just doesn't like people. People are just taxing to be around. I don't know what it is. I just don't like spending time with people. I like spending time by myself. And you also said your channel is a way to have something to do, to feel something. I think you also mentioned in some video, I don't know if it was the same video, you said that you felt disassociated from life, numb from life. And so at another place you said, I don't feel qualified to have an opinion. And I thought that all of that sounded very much like Abstractum.
That's are you gonna
No, you
I
can
was gonna ask. I thought a lot of that was misericordium, because it sounds kind of like my secondary type you thought was urbanum, but I also thought like misericordia because of how like negative or kind of depressing or kind of like neurotic it is. So I was just wondering what you thought about that. I guess all abstractum types would kind of just have that.
Yeah, well,
Sense.
there is a little bit of that. What did you say? Depress, negative. Which word was it you used?
Neurotic.
Neurotic. Yeah. Well, it was something, but the thing is, I often contrast and compare, and I have talked with someone who have misericordium. I don't think I have talked with someone who have misericordium and meritum, but I have talked with misericordium and excidium and misericordium and corpus in their configuration, two abstractums. And the one with corpus and misericordium was a bit more dry than you sound. And yeah, I mean, I associate all of this that I just said with abstractum. I mean, misericordium is a bit more like sensitive to what's happening in the environment. So it's like they have this kind of anguish towards things. And it's true that you bring up a little bit of that as well. I think that this kind of hypercriticality and dislike of like loud people and things like that, we will go into that later. Yeah, that can sound a bit like misericordium. But the reason why I thought, as I was watching your video, I thought that you sounded like ContraPoints, who is an urbanum. So it was like your voice, and also a little bit the way you look, and especially when you had those glasses, you did look kind of urbanumic with those urbanums that have like glasses. And so like, yeah, there's like small things like that. And I would like to be able to define very clearly what belongs to what energy, but it is very difficult since they kind of meld into each other when they are in one person, and when they are right next to each other, such as misericordium and urbanum, there's probably going to be a lot of similarities. And yeah, I've sometimes said that the corpus can increase the sensitivity in misericordium, so that those who are not corpus primary might think that they might confuse corpus with misericordium. But you thought that you had excidium also in your configuration.
I think it was yeah, it was at first. I guess it was because like I wanted to feel like, ooh, I'm a dark, bad person. But I feel like I'm definitely more corpus because especially when I interact with people, I try to be agreeable, I try to be helpful, I try to make things function rather than going against the flow and just demanding things. And I don't know, maybe I don't understand excidium that well, but corpus definitely fits more with this idea of just wanting things to function or just kind of being the backbone. And a lot of people have said I'm very down to earth and very stable. So I feel like that would fit a lot with the corpus rather than excidium.
Yeah, and of course abstractum too can be often regarded as down to earth. I mean, people have said that about me as well, because abstractum is not a very, I mean, it's the most introverted energy. So
Yeah.
yeah.
it's not like fiducium where you just like start talking about all of these crazy things and connecting all of these random ideas like Jordan Peterson or Ayn Rand or like this, or I guess even magnitudinum would do that too, where the ideas are so above the world that it's kind of, doesn't fit well with the reality. So um
Yeah, so I have some keywords here for abstractum. Perhaps you can say what you identify and what you don't identify with, if anything. So I think of it as a kind of thought digesting or contemplative indifference, lack of worldly enthusiasm. Well, it can be lack of enthusiasm in general, but I like to add that it's more often specifically worldly or lack of the outside environment, which is like the description of introversion, which I like more than this idea that introversion is simply getting tired by people and needing to recharge, because I think it's just a human thing to be exhausted when being too social. But I do like that description of lack of enthusiasm and passivity, lack of energy, impartiality, minimalism, lack of demands, struggle with meaninglessness.
yeah, I definitely agree with all of those. I definitely also feel that I can be enthusiastic sometimes, or like I guess overwhelmed with enthusiasm, like almost kind of like the emotion takes over because I'm like trying to push it away, I guess. And I feel like my urbanum secondary makes me more enthusiastic or more sociable or able to speak with more energy. And definitely starting a YouTube channel helped with being more social. And but other than that, I definitely agree with, being passive, feeling meaningless, or feeling like an observer, or being an outsider looking in, or feeling like you just don't fit in, like you're just always wanting to stand aside or being on the side and watching everything as opposed to being in the action. Um, and being in the action is uncomfortable or like scary, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I like
Yeah,
that quote where you said that you don't feel qualified to have an opinion. It's like low self-confidence, perhaps, or like
yeah,
I don't know, but I can sometimes also feel that way. Like I guess I also regard it as kind of being self-aware that all the things that the complexity of the world makes it very difficult to like know things. So what's the point of like having an opinion on things like politics? It's like there's so much stuff to really know to have a really informed opinion on it.
yeah. I think a lot of abstractum types are more humble, or because they're much more willing to just look at everything and try to like in your words, you say that like abstractum types digest or chew on ideas, while I feel like fiduciums or magnitudinums, I think I said that right. They I feel like they can take a arrogant or a very like they just go along with an idea for the ride instead of seeing it for what it is. Um, yeah, so definitely abstractums are humble or more aware of things, and because they're more aware, it's harder to become attached or engaged because you can kind of see like the lie or the illusion or kind of like where it's going to go. And so I feel like abstractums are more, or at least in myself, I feel more particular about the things that I take action on because I feel like I see the end, or you know, it's easy to feel like something isn't worth it because you see how big it is, I guess. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so we can look at the keywords for urbanum and corpus as well. There was one thing that I thought was interesting when there was a video where you were taking personality tests. And one of the questions that came up was, I often feel anxious about what could go wrong. And you said absolutely that you identified with that.
Yeah.
It made me think of my parents who are corpus, and they often seem to like feel anxious about what could go wrong, or like.
Yeah, I definitely have that feeling, and um it could be growing up in a kind of chaotic family maybe, but um I definitely feel like, especially like the urbanum aspect of myself, I feel like I try to smile a lot, or try to be like an authentic smile where I try to make the other person feel comfortable and to make things feel like they're flowing and go in a conversation just so I can get it over with. And I guess that's also corpus as well, like just wanting things to function so I don't have to worry, or so I can get back to being an introvert and being alone, um, like pushing the social conversations through, um, to get back to center, I guess. Um, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I probably would not have agreed with that much. And that might be the difference then between Exidium and corpus, because I think Exidium is more careless, and sometimes I have done questionable things just because, I guess, boredom, or like it's like I don't care what happens as long as something happens. Like even if some kind of conflict or even a war should happen, it's better than how nothing happens in my life. And that is like the combination of, because I don't think that an actual Exidium would end up in a situation where nothing happens, but with an Abstractum, I think that can happen. So I guess I can't really recall a time where I felt anxious about what could go wrong. And that was also something that I noticed when I talked with this person, this other abstractum who had Misericordiam and Corpus. He mentioned that he felt very like he had difficulty relaxing around people, and he felt like anxious when he was in school and things like that. That was not something that I identified with, except maybe a few days when I had encounter with some older students or things like that, when they might be a bit threatening, but not so consistently, not so often as it seemed. And you identify with that, I think.
Oh yeah,
I
definitely.
gave you some comments that other abstractums had said, and that was one of them, and you identified with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I think that's definitely the big difference between like Exidium and Corpus for the abstractum type in general, I feel like. Is yeah, Corpus are more nervous and Exidiums are like, whatever.
Yeah, and I also, since I also have libidinum, it's like the most desensitized combination. And I guess the more sensitive you are, the more prone to anxiousness you are.
Yeah, and isn't libidium and excidium, they're both in the right-hand column. So it's very like subtractive or like I don't know, like pulling away or being I know they're all in the right-hand column. So
yeah, it's more simplistic, less complexity, and more focused on like their own personal desire, I would say. So more independence, less social and less idealistic, I would say. Like sometimes I use the phrase raw nature.
yeah, and then urbanum and corpus are in the middle. So they're more like engaged in the environment, I guess, instead of independent desires. So
yeah, it's more focused on the environment and competency and maintenance, as Bolelo said in one of our groups. But yeah, the way I describe, perhaps we should. You said that you naturally have low self-esteem and very hypercritical view of yourself, and that you criticize yourself all the time. You have a very negative voice and trying to work on not beating yourself up. And I thought that was interesting because I, for the first time, had the opportunity to talk, not interview in a conversation like this, but on email, an urbanum type. And he mentioned one of the recurring tendencies in himself, or his struggles, was being overly critical of himself and others. And so I'm wondering if that might be tied to urbanum. And it makes sense because I have noticed, especially with magnitudinum, who is also in the same column, they tend to be very judgmental and have a strong superego where they that does judge themselves and others. And that would be then like the combination of this criticality with the imagination that tends to express itself in a kind of almost exaggeration, talking very big in magnitudinum, which I also, that's why partly why I chose the name magnitudinum. So it's like an exaggeration, and that is sometimes slightly divorced from reality. But with urbanum, then it would be more like, because urbanum, I've noticed, is very often focused on like mastering themselves, and also giving advice to others, like coaching. And yeah, so I'm thinking that might be related to criticality. It makes sense. I don't know. I would need to interview more people. But when you said, when I saw this in your videos, hypercritical view of yourself, I was thinking that might be tied to urbanum.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because you wrote that urbanum are high in conscientiousness and agreeableness. So there's almost like this duty or this sense of like trying to be like a good person or trying to do what you can. So it's easy to feel like you're not good enough, especially if you see yourself as an expert or wanting to master something, which I definitely want to master a lot of skills. It's easy to be critical of yourself and yeah.
Yeah, I also thought of urbanum when you said you were into Randian objectivism and capitalism. But then you heard some convincing criticism of it. And you noticed that many objectivists were overweight. And you asked, how then are you rational? Because I guess objectivism is a lot about being rational. I know a lot about objectivism from listening to like Stefan Molyneux, and he also has urbanum in his configuration. So yeah, that's why I made that association, but I don't think that it's necessarily. Yeah, you said maybe I'm being hypercritical. Do you want to say something about that? Your interest in objectivism?
I think when I first started to get into politics and stuff, I definitely saw myself as a libertarian and someone who just didn't want to engage in the left or right because I thought they were both wrong. And Ayn Rand seemed like, I don't know, I feel like her ideology was a virus that latched on to my mind and took over very quickly and easily. And after a couple of years, I started to not feel satisfied with it and limited by it, and seeing the hypocrisy and kind of how other objectivists weren't, they seem very normal and not that great. I felt like the ideology was something to let go of, and watching Leo Gura and listening to a bunch of other people, I started to realize that ideology isn't good, and objectivism is very rigid, and reason is limited. But I still very much like the values of it, like being competent, working hard. I still like property rights, that kind of thing. So I see it more as like a tool to be more efficient and a better person. But as soon as I start to get too rigid or too judgmental, that's when I let go or create some distance between myself and the ideology.
Okay, so let me just mention some keywords that I've written from Urbanum. You can say what you identify with and not identify with. So expertise, mastery, advice, service, problem solving is probably involved in that. I've been speculating that perhaps Urbanum increases an interest in problem solving, since that would relate to like giving advice, and like it's like, yeah, following formulas. I've noticed that a lot of Urbanums like to like, whether they follow a formula that comes from the culture, or they construct something themselves, but they tend to lean into some kind of, yeah, to formula and being like system oriented. So that can also be related to that, and prudence, being careful, and frivolity, being kind of silly, and dislike negativity, adaptability, which can often involve a kind of a trivializing of authenticity. And yeah, criticism is something I added after talking with this Urbanum. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the idea of systems thinking, because like I like to come up with like formulas or like algorithms for dealing with things in life, and you just gotta follow like the system and everything will work. Um, and then like with negativity, I definitely, especially on my channel, I feel like I have been very negative and talked about a lot of negative things, which made me think that I was misericordia. But I also feel like it's something that I'm trying to overcome and something that I want to let go of. Especially, I watched a lot of YouTubers that were very much into the black pill and kind of being this victim, and being uh, a homosexual and being a furry as well. I also notice a lot of victim mentality in those groups as well. And I hate the victim mentality. I think that's bad. And I'm very critical of that kind of thinking. Just this feeling sad and feeling, you know, like you can't do anything to fix your life. I very much believe that you can fix and change your life. And then again, as I said earlier, I definitely feel that inauthenticity with the urbanum, like this idea of just being smiley and trying really hard to please, I feel like. And maybe that's not urbanum, but I definitely feel like that sense of like smiling a lot and trying really hard to like be competent at the expense of authenticity. So
Yeah, I would say that's urbanum. But and I also saw a video where you like said that authenticity is for losers or something like that.
yeah, I like a lot of stuff on my channel is kind of just throwing ideas out there, and I go through a lot of change in my thinking, so I don't think authenticity is for losers anymore. But I definitely was dealing or thinking about like, should you be authentic? Like, what if the person doesn't like you? What if things fall apart if you start, telling the truth? Or like, what if you express yourself in a certain way that just makes everything difficult? So that's kind of where I was coming from with that video. But yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think we should strive towards authenticity.
So some keywords for corpus then are anxiety, soft-heartedness, loyal support, fear of. Yeah, this is kind of interesting because some of the misericordums who have corpus in the configuration have mentioned that they have a fear sometimes of what they might find out if they think too much or explore too much. What do you think of that?
uh that's I feel like what's there to fear by exploring more? I would much rather just go deeper and just go all in. I don't, especially because it's the world of ideas. I feel safe in ideas, so I don't think there's anything to worry about, honestly.
Yeah, I have noticed that some actual corpus types also tends to not be very interested in like seeking answers and can have what seems to be something like that fear of what they might find out. But yeah, since Abstractum is a sapientium type, I think that overrides any such thing, even if they have corpus in their configuration. So yeah, carefulness, agreeableness, pedantic.
Well, I would also say that like maybe there's some ideas that I avoid subconsciously. Like there's some ideas that I can go deep into, and then there's other ideas, or even feelings that I just pretend don't exist. And sometimes people have to tell me something that's obvious when I thought I saw everything. So I feel like that could be a corpus aspect in myself for sure. Um, and then those last couple of words you said agreeableness, pedantic.
Yeah, carefulness. Do you feel pedantic?
Yeah, definitely careful, wanting to agree, doesn't want anything to fall apart, nothing to break, nothing to, yeah, no chaos. I feel like I'm not a fan of chaos.
Yeah.
Um,
So perhaps we should go into this. I usually ask people uh, two or three questions, and these are not just to figure out like what energy they are, but it's more like I have always been like a bit interested in knowing what people struggle with, because I have always felt that I have certain struggles and certain things that like motivates me, and I have found it odd that other people are not motivated by similar things. So like I noticed very early that people have different psychologies, and that could be like frustrating. How do I find like-minded and things like that? So I've gone through phases in my life, and that's still something that like is interesting to me. That's why I usually ask like, what is the most recurring tendency, and like what is your biggest struggle, and is there some behavior you dislike in other people and things like that. And you answered that you think the most recurring tendency for you is to withdraw or hide from everyone and everything out of boredom. That was something I identify with as well, and that's something that people who have Excidium in their configuration often say. So that made me think, when you answered this question, it had been a few weeks since I had watched your videos. I contacted you, but I think it ended up in your spam, so it took a while for you to dig it out and find it. So yeah, I didn't really remember everything then. So that made me think that perhaps he had Excidium or something like that. But then when I rewatched your videos, I saw this kind of, I guess I would call it a fragility, and the focus on social anxiety that made me think, yeah, he was definitely corpusic. And that's interesting that even without Excidium and Abstractum can feel like they just want to get away out of boredom. And perhaps that is also a bit with like Urbanum. I think that Urbanum and Libidinum might also feel a bit like that. Or disenchantment, and then getting lost in or obsessed with one particular thing that is usually imaginary, an idea, book, movie, song, video game, or art piece. Yeah, and that sounds very much like Abstractum. The thing, it is very brief, and I have noticed that Abstractums tend to answer these questions very briefly, so there was not much else to go on. Like what
That's interesting. Like when you talk to a fiducium, did they answer in like paragraphs or?
I haven't actually talked a lot with fiduciums, and it was a long time now, so I can't remember exactly what they said. But some people like Misericordums can write a lot.
Okay, that's interesting.
And about your biggest struggle for you in life, you said finding the balance between independence and dependence. When you become too independent, you realize how vulnerable and insufficient you are. But then when you're too dependent, you feel consumed, trapped, and suffocated. Or simply, it's navigating the social world or the world of people. How much freedom would I allow myself is the basic question for you. And that too sounds very much like Abstractum. You could throw in some urbanumic aspects in there as well, depending on how intense this is with like needing to like navigate the social world. Because I don't think I would phrase it quite like that. I mean, I do struggle with like balance between independence and dependence, but yeah, I feel that my problem is a bit more that I tend to uh, my desire for independence tends to like put me in a corner where like I don't have many options, so to speak. So that is more my struggle. And finally, about behaviors you dislike in other people. And this was also different from me, because I tend to mostly like people who are judgmental, or is that your phone?
Yeah, sorry about that. This isn't my house. Because my house is under construction. So,
Okay. Oh, so you can't answer the phone either. It's not your phone.
Yeah, it's not my phone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just ignore it.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't. I guess I dislike. Yeah, I can't remember what I said. I do remember. I have written down my own answers, but I don't have time to look them up right now. But you said that you dislike loud, hyper-competitive, and overly aggressive, mean-spirited people. And I can't remember. I mean, I guess perhaps I haven't encountered very many loud or hyper-competitive. I imagine there are more loud and hyper-competitive people in America. You know, Sweden is a bit famous for being kind of quiet and not very competitive. We have this law of Jante where it's not good to stand out too much, things like that. So yeah, hyper competitive, and that's interesting because urbanum tends to be competitive, but you dislike hyper competitiveness.
Yeah, that could just be the abstractum type itself, maybe just feeling like, you know, wanting to be passive, and while hyper competitive people are just overly aggressive. So,
Do you feel that you are competitive?
Sometimes I feel like it depends what it is. Some things I can be very competitive and very like I want to win, and then other things I don't even bother to try. Like I just don't even take it seriously. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I have a competitive streak when it comes to at least the things that matters to me. So, and that's probably Exidium. I would probably say Exidium is even more competitive than Urbanum. You also said that Schopenhauer's essay on noise perfectly articulates your hateful feelings. I haven't had a time to read that yet. I will check that out. But do you want to say
it's a
something
great
about?
read.
You want to say
It's
something
just
about that?
um he just it's just so great about how how noise destroys the ability to think and to contemplate, and he just does it in a poetic way. And um, yeah, I don't know, it's just a great criticism of noises and why people make noise unnecessarily and how you know horrible it is. uh,
Yeah, I'll check that out. And then I sent you some follow-up questions. And you identify with feeling uneasy among people with high energy and uneasiness with things that are out of control. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, so did you feel annoyed by being labeled or having different identities forced onto you by others at some point?
um I yeah, it bothers me sometimes, especially because the way people see the world and me just seems so strange or just so subjective or such a projection. But um, I also feel that it that's kind of just the way things are, and I just let people see me however they want instead of getting upset about it. Because when I was younger, it used to really bug me, and now which is why I thought I was Misericordia secondary. I feel like younger, I had a lot of that, but now I just feel like I'm much more like relaxed about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Yeah, I also was bothered by the way people seem to view me differently than how I viewed myself. Well, I felt like misunderstood, and I guess I tried to like understand why that bothered me so much when I was young. And I think that the reason for that was that I felt like I guess it is important to feel understood. One of these things in like therapy, it is well known that it is very healing to people to feel understood. Sometimes simply the like relationship between the therapist and the patient is more important than some technique or like some prescription or like just take these pills. It's like if the patient feels understood, that's very healing to them. And I felt like I had a need when I was younger to like be seen for who I am, even those parts of me that weren't like people are probably not going to like this about me, but I need to show it. I need to. It's like it needs to be like actualized, expressed, and I think I intuitively understood something like that. People need to do that, I guess. So it's like a combination. It's like I usually ascribe certain manifestations that are good for like working on yourself. So like on the vital level, I think of self-expression. You feel a sense of substance, and the emotional, I think, is very much related to this idea of feeling understood. And once you feel understood, I think that you can easier move past it. It's like when I expressed certain things or like changed style or things like that, or I met new people and I managed to give a different impression of myself, then I could suddenly, that thing, whether people saw me for who I am, for who I felt I am, was less important. So I guess that could also be like a part of growing up, and I guess it could be circumstantial as well, whether or not. I'm not sure that's necessarily related to a specific energy, but it is interesting.
Sorry to cut you off. Do you think abstractum types are misunderstood because they're not good at expressing themselves, do you think? Or like they're too passive about it? Or do you think like they're just so different? Or like maybe it's a like a combination of lacking experience or lacking interest in the world, so there's nothing to really talk about or to connect with?
Yeah, like I said, I think it is a kind of a very much a universal thing, since therapists or like in psycho therapy, some people talk about this, that relationship or feeling understood is healing to anyone. But yeah, I would say that perhaps abstractum, I think that they are very prone to being regarded as being very like innocent, soft, like obedient, because they don't really have that strong opinions or desires. They don't mind going along with like rules and things like that, and that might them look like goody two shoes or something like that. I remember one time when my grandmother told me and my brother that she had mentioned to a cousin of ours who didn't like eat or something like that. He's an Exidium, and she told him that me and my brother was very obedient and we always ate everything or something like that. I can't remember. And she said that he just laughed at that. And that kind of annoyed me, because why are you telling people that I am this good person who is like eating properly and things like that? That was like, you're making me sound like something that, I would probably laugh at as well. So I guess, yeah, the thing is that people have these secondary energies that don't get expressed as much as their primary one, and when that is not seen, I think that they can feel like a part of them is not, recognized, and that might be very common in abstractum types.
Yeah, for sure.
And during COVID-19, you said you enjoyed visiting public places when they were empty.
Yeah, I mean, when you were allowed to,
Yeah,
and it was surreal and pretty, like, it was much less chaotic and, I don't know, I guess liberating to not have to navigate a store or go to a restaurant with people, with so many people, and you weren't expected to have a conversation or, um, you know,
yeah, yeah. I
present
think that
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very much an abstractum thing to like just enjoy going to places where there tends to be a lot of people, and then find that there are not a lot of people there, or like going there at night or something like that.
Yeah, I bet abstractum types really like liminal spaces. Have have you seen pictures of liminal spaces where um there's just like these pictures with pools of water and it's like really dark, or these corporate buildings where no one's there and it's late at night. There's just empty chairs. Um and there's kind of like a nostalgia or a quietness to these usually very busy places. Um But I don't know, maybe everyone likes those places, but I feel like abstractum types specifically would like those more.
Yeah, but lately I sometimes felt perhaps this is a part of growing older. But sometimes when I visit places where I used to visit when I was younger, and where I perhaps were with a bunch of friends or relatives or something like that. And as I go there now, many years later, and there is nobody there, it's like there's like this feeling of like nostalgia, like things aren't now like they used to be back then. Like, I don't know. Um, yeah, I think also many abstractums feel like going to clubs and simply having fun or letting loose can be kind of difficult.
Yeah, extremely difficult, especially because when you don't have much energy to begin with or not much of an interest in the world in front of you, and parties or loud places expect you to put up a lot of energy for no real benefit, but just to kind of just let go. Yeah, very difficult.
Yeah, we're soon at 1 hour, so I want to speed up a little bit because this has been a kind of interesting conversation, and yeah, I want to go through some more things here.
Okay.
You feel like you haven't created enough. Your potential creativity hasn't been unleashed yet. Anything you want to say about that?
Um, I feel like I'm just too passive or lazy, and I know that there's so much more that I could bring to the world, and it's a struggle figuring that out.
Yeah, that sounds a bit like opposite to this tendency to have like low self-confidence. You feel like you have something at least like you could potentially do.
Yeah, I feel like the low self-confidence was kind of like a another mind virus or kind of like a false delusion that I believed in. And I feel like I'm starting to overcome it or just to not take it seriously, um, especially in the past month or so. So I try to just not think about ideas when I could just, there's like better ways of thinking, and I try to just think about the better ways more than the bad ways.
That sounds
Yeah.
like urbanomic positive thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you said you already said you identify with being passive when I said that. Yeah, lazy and passive in the real world, but in many ways you feel very far ahead of people intellectually or inwardly.
Yeah. I feel like, abstractum types are more like philosophical, so they understand the world much deeper, so they can make better decisions, but the cost of that is, you don't have a lot of energy or a lot of action. So it can look like you're far behind outwardly, but inwardly, I feel like there's a whole world that you have that other people don't, or like things that other people don't, or you see things that other people don't. But because only you see it and not everyone else can see it, it can feel like you're not making any progress. And when everyone's telling you that you haven't made much progress. Um, so, yeah.
And here's another thing that sounds very more like abstractum than like gratum types. You don't care that much about how you are perceived by others. You only care if you perceive yourself positively.
Yeah. And I feel like this just came from thinking philosophically. It's just, you should only care about your image um, in a sense where you like the image that you project, and if the people that you care about like the image. Like, because if it's just random people, or just wanting to be famous, it's a meaningless image. um yeah.
So you also you talked before that you identified with the problem solving, and I gave you a quote that another abstractum that I had been talking with, and he said that he enjoyed like problem solving and games and things like that, which you agreed with, and he also mentioned shares and options. Do you identify with that as well? Are you interested in things like shares and options? That's
What do you
like,
mean by shares and
I
options?
guess that's like the stock market, I think.
um kind of. I invest in the stock market, but just to have money later on. Not really. I'm not really into Bitcoin or anything like that. Like, I do believe in investing, but it's more of like an investment in your mind, or an investment in building a skill, I would say. Um, I feel like investing in the material things are good, but they don't pay off as much as investing in yourself. Uh, That's what I would say.
Uh, and you also said in your YouTube videos you often wear a hat, and you said that hats makes you feel less vulnerable. So what is
Yeah.
this? What is this feeling of vulnerability?
Um, I don't know. I guess it's just like you're too much in the spotlight or something, or I don't know, being called out, or like I would have worn my hat in this video. Uh, but I feel like a hat just makes you feel more comfortable or safe. I feel like if we lived like a couple centuries ahead and our culture wasn't as rigid, I would probably wear like a spacesuit, or and like have like like Iron Man, like have like armor and yeah, I feel like you just feel more comfortable. You feel like the world is easier to deal with when you have like extra layers or a hat or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I can understand that. So we are at 1 hour, but I think I want to extend this conversation since we are two abstractums here. We can talk about my answers to these questions, because I thought it was interesting how you identified with so many of them, despite us having different configurations. So yeah, one of the things that I feel is like a recurring tendency is difficulty making myself heard in situations with others. And you strongly agreed with that. And also passivity, not knowing what I want apart from those few things that interests me, and often a sense of being useless. And you agreed with that as well, a sense of being useless to others and others being useless to me. And it's interesting that you said that, because that was the next thing that I wrote. Are also a recurring disappointment in other people, feeling they are useless or boring to me. And I always figured that had a lot to do with excidium in me, and was one of those things that I often look at to try to distinguish, does this person have excidium in his configuration? But I guess that might be very much an abstractum thing, since you strongly agreed with that. So I guess I can't use that to distinguish anymore. And that's good to know.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you didn't quite agree with as much was I only trust myself to accomplish certain things. That's something I have often felt, because when I have a strong interest in things, often there are many things that you can only accomplish with other people, or which might become better with other people, or easier to do with other people. But very often I found it very difficult to get other people on board for various reasons. It could be that they are simply not interested in working with me, or it could be that they have completely different interests, or interests that I can't relate to. And then I often want to go through with doing it anyway, but of course it will be more limited, but I usually manage to get certain things done, and that makes it feel like I can only trust myself to do certain things. Also, sometimes when I have cooperated or done things with others, I feel like I could have done better if it's like the other person held me back in some sense, or they did things that could have been better if they didn't do it. Like, it's difficult just to like collaborate sometimes.
Yeah.
And a feeling of me against the rest of the world is something I felt, and I guess that is also very much excidium. So it makes sense that
Yeah.
you
I feel like that's more excidium. I feel like abstractum generally is just more like passive or observing the world. Excidium is definitely wanting something from the world, or like extracting something. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, I would say perhaps I have a stronger desire sometimes that comes up. It's difficult to know what it, because I guess when it comes to what I'm interested in, there is not something very consistent. I often get hooked on certain things, or like I see things that kind of hypnotizes me, which I also ascribe to libidinum a lot. It's like I know that a lot of libidinum types they can watch like a TV show or movie or something, and then they want to go out and do that. I guess you have seen lately, there are a lot of women. I read an article in the paper that a lot of women have gone to South Korea to find love, because there was some female journalist in South Korea who like asked these women, like, why are there so many English women coming here or from Europe? And they said, oh, I saw this Netflix show about South Korean drama or something like that, and I liked the way South Korean men behaved, and I thought that English men were like not quite as chivalrous or dressed as well, and so they went to like South Korea to find love. And I find that to be a very like libidinum thing. Like you see something that like hypnotizes you, like you want that. It has, I guess, a bit of envy in it as well, as you like seek that out. And I have often done things like that are like things that I've seen that I want to experience and things like that. And yeah, I often decline joining others when they invite me to do things, which you also agreed with. And of course, you said that you don't get many invitations, but I was also thinking of like relatives or like family want to go on a trip and things like that. I often feel like I'm not so enthusiastic about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely lots of family trips to go on that I feel like I have to go on, to maintain family, but also it's like, I could stay home and just relax, honestly.
Yeah, and the next thing is kind of interesting because I was wondering how much this has to do with Exidium, because I enjoy extreme stuff and things like that, which can also be like people in the environment. I guess I don't mind if people are like I don't know, ending up fighting each other, like certain what's the word, not struggles, but when two people are clashing, it can be like entertaining to watch. So yeah, like including like sexual expressions in art and things like that. And you strongly agree with this, and you brought up furry art. I thought that your interest in furry art and identification with being a furry had to do with like the limbic or mammalian brain influence, like or is it mammalian or mammalian? Is that how you pronounce it?
Probably mammalian. I'm not
Yeah,
entirely sure, honestly.
yeah, like mammalian.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
interesting because I thought it would contribute to urbanum because I remember on your website I read the Abstractum urbanum description and it said that they're usually in some kind of unusual subculture or they're part of like a subgroup, and I thought that would make sense because like furries are like a subculture.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's true. I forgot that I wrote about that. Yeah, it could be related to urban. I mean, both urban. I think that all the Gratum types are strongly connected to the mammalian brain. But then when you look at the lower sphere, there's only corpus that has additional influence from Gratum. So corpus is going to increase that tendency with the mammalian brain. So it's more like that. It's not that it necessarily is related to corpus itself. It's just that strengthens like the urbanumic tendency or the libidinemic tendency or the misericordemic tendency. So yeah, but since you brought it up when I said like extreme stuff, do you also think of it as like an extreme thing, that you like it because it's extreme? Because I did
um,
notice that even though furries are like soft animals, like cuddly is what I think of. At the same time, your avatar is like a wolf or something.
yeah, protogen. That's the name of the
Okay.
species. But I well, I don't know if I like extreme stuff. I guess when you said extreme, I was thinking like things that were different or things that were not
Yeah,
the
like
norm.
wearing a spacesuit and things like that.
Yeah. Because like when you said like you enjoy seeing violence or something, I'm definitely against seeing that. Like I'd much rather be you know, like yeah, I'm not sure what to think about that one, to be
But you
honest.
like heavy metal music?
Yeah, I like heavy metal, but I also like classical. So, um,
Yeah, I like all kinds of things.
Yeah. I feel like because you asked this question to like gauge excidium or corpus, right?
Yeah, I think of it as excidium in myself. I mean, this was about myself, what is like a recurring tendency.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's a recurring tendency for me, so yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, and then another thing that I mentioned was that this is something that I've been thinking more and more recently, but I feel that other people seem to more easily get annoyed by things than me. But once I do get annoyed by something, I can become hateful. And you agreed with that, and I thought that was interesting because you have this sensitivity, and I know that misericordiam tends to increase the likelihood of getting annoyed by things, and also magnitudinum. So I would say that if you, yeah, would you did agree with that? Do you still feel that way, that other people get more annoyed by things than you?
Yeah, it's more like I feel like, abstractums are, passive about most things. And then if there's something that's really sticking out, then it's like, okay, yeah, that's annoying. Um, yeah, or just being particular with the kinds of things that are annoying. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's something you notice now a lot with people getting canceled and things like that on the internet, and the polarization in almost everywhere, I think, in politics and things like that. The state of the world, it does look like a lot of people are getting easily annoyed, and you don't see a lot of abstractums. They probably are not so annoyed, but they are not out there. You don't really see them.
Yeah, it's more like I feel like I'm more annoyed at the fact that everyone is getting annoyed.
Yeah,
Or it's like, why are we why is politics so like superficial and artificial and we're not really dealing with the problems? I feel like abstractum types would be more annoyed by like or the sapient types in general are just annoyed by like the bigger issues rather than issues right in front of us or like practical issues or something. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
And so the last thing that I said was about myself. Recurring desire to strive for independence, but the independence ends up mostly being avoidance that causes nothing to happen in my life. And you agreed with that as well. And you phrased it also as, or an independence that leaves me lonely and ironically bored again. And I would agree with that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's this conflict with, yeah, independence, and that, yeah, that it can lead to boredom.
Yeah, it's trying to find like a balance between um like how far do you want to stray away from everything? Or like finding like that perfect balance of like stimulation without getting overly involved, I guess you could say.
So the last thing that I want to bring up that I thought was kind of interesting was in one of your videos you talked about journaling, and I guess I always called it like, I think that is the correct name for it. I've also done journaling, but I simply called it writing a diary, even though I felt like diary was not the right word for it, because it's not like I write very in depth about my feelings and things like that, but like noting down what happens and things like that. And you said that by doing a journal or journaling, you have a why for why you're changing things, and you also have good reasons for the new things that you're starting, because it's like, well, I feel really unhappy when I watch YouTube, but if I start reading, I feel better about myself. So it seems that your interest in journaling has to do with, I guess, motivation. It
Well,
might be related.
I think it's also just being aware of yourself as well. I mean, motivation for sure, but definitely also being aware.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you said you've always been the kind of person to push down your feelings or suppress your feelings. That's not something I identify with a lot. I don't feel like I pushed down. I do feel that I was inhibited in a way that I wasn't aware of something like, I guess maybe anger, because at one point in my life when I was very young, I started like a fight. I got provoked and I attacked everyone, and that ended up kind of badly because everyone just jumped on me, I couldn't really do anything in the end. So then I decided not to fight again, and that made me repress anger a bit. But other than that, I haven't really identified with suppressing my emotions. So I'm wondering if that might be related to like agreeableness or like urbanum or something like that.
Yeah, or even corpus maybe. Like,
Yeah.
well, like for me, I don't think I would ever start a fight, or anything like that. Like, I feel like with my feelings and being like corpus secondary, I would probably like eat a lot of food or like numb my feelings, while I guess exedium would like expand or like start a fight or um like get angry for like no reason or something like that.
Yeah, like strike back in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you recognize that when you ignore your emotions and your feelings, you ignore what you value and instead value things that you don't value. And I wonder if that is like a major problem for like urbanum, if that's what's happening when they tend to adapt more than being authentic, that they also suppress their feelings in a way. Because I
Yeah.
imagine urbanums must have a lot of feelings in that they are in that sphere, right in the center of it.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I feel like it could also be a universal thing. Um, just because like if you're not aware of your feelings, then how do you know what you care about, or what interests you or what makes you happy? Um,
Yeah, because there's something I've noticed with the Gratum types, as I call them, that they tend to adapt to fashions and things like that and get like caught up in that things, such as mob culture and things like that. Cancel culture often have many Gratum types in them, I think.
yeah, for sure. Or victim movements or
Yeah.
things like that.
And I liked what you said also in that video about a practical approach to journaling. You mentioned that having a journal makes it easy to go back and see how your life has changed, and that you like the idea of being able to remember what you've done on a day-to-day basis. And that's exactly why I started also journaling. It was actually my mother who did that, and when I was interested in knowing what I did like 2 years prior. I was very nostalgic. When I was 15, I was nostalgic back when I was 13, and she said that she did that, and so I asked her if she could like see if she had written something about me. But she wouldn't let me read them because they were like private and things like that. But she gave me one and said, "Well, you can start doing this yourself," you know. So I started doing that. I haven't do. Sometimes there have been periods in my life where I didn't go to school, so not much interesting happened in my life. So I forgot to just write down because every day was like the same. but whenever like something big happened in my life, I remember that, and I started like writing again. But so when did you start journaling?
I've been journaling on and off for like a couple of years. I feel like within like the beginning of this year, I started to take journaling seriously. Um, and it's really helpful, and I'm glad you're journaling too, because it helps a lot with um making your life better. I feel like um especially if uh if you don't pay attention to your life, or if you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing anything, sometimes it helps to just start writing what's going on, and then you can start to build from what you wrote down. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much this might be related to Abstractum, but I do have this kind of curiosity sometimes, like looking back and what did I do this, what did I do on this particular day last year or like 10 years ago or things like that. Like it's like a curiosity that I'm not sure a lot of other people have, because I know that like I said, my mom also writes journals, but I don't think she has read, like ever gone back and read them. I'm not even sure why she does it, but
Yeah,
I,
maybe it's just sometimes journaling in the moment is therapeutic and helpful, but I think the idea of going back and reading what you wrote, I think that could connects really well with this idea of like chewing on experiences, or kind of like taking an idea and looking at it from all angles and really getting the essence of it, while most other personality types kind of just take things as they come and then they throw it out and then they look for a new experience. Like
yeah,
especially like a fiducium person would probably, they're always like looking for like new ideas or trying new things, while I feel like Abstractum could sit with one idea and sit with that idea for a while and not get bored of it, or find like new interesting things about it that they didn't realize was interesting. Um,
yeah, it's like sucking something dry almost.
yeah, yeah, like getting all of the nutrients and being like um, economical, I guess, or being like, taking everything slow and making sure to get all of it, and then letting in something new, or like having everything organized in your internal world, and then once it's all organized, then you can add something new and reintegrate that new thing, and then you add another new thing. While I don't know why I keep talking about fiducium, but I feel like fiduciums kind of just, they add stuff in before they even have had a chance to know what's going on in their own head, or to like figure out what's happening. Um, I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
like they just suck in a lot of ideas and then put them out there again. But it's yeah, it doesn't feel like they really digest them very long sometimes. It's like this constant curiosity and imagining things that makes them like, I guess I imagine that they can write like a novel or something using a few ideas very quickly, and then they move on to the next thing. Whereas an abstractum would, like, if they write some books, they only write a few during their entire life, and it's very well researched and like digested before they put it out.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess magnitudum would probably, I don't know, they're more like just black and white and very like straightforward, and that's it. Like the facts are the facts. This is right, this is wrong. So
Yeah, and I also think they are is related to a kind of frustration with like the world. So I guess they can be more like sarcastic, and I mean they can be very good at comedy. It's like, I mean, Fiducian also tends to write a lot of, or like do comedy, but it's not very dark and cynical very often that you get with Magnitudinum or.
Yeah, like very aggressive towards ideas, you could say.
Yeah, it's like everything is like, yeah, they are more serious in a way. Can be too serious almost, and that's, I think, where this black and white thing comes from, because it becomes so important to them that, yeah, it becomes like black and white.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say here is, I thought this was interesting. You said, who even are you? What's your identity if you don't have a documentation of your life? And I started laughing then when you continued saying, I guess that could be a little bit extreme. You're being a bit extreme by documenting your life. And I thought that was funny because that's exactly what I'm doing. I don't just write down things in a journal, but I also, like, every now and then I like to shoot things with camcorder, and I have also, I like taking pictures and yeah, preserving things for my life. So yeah, I'm very much documenting my life, and would like to put it together in some kind of, I guess, autobiography that is more visual than simply writing like a book or something. And
Yeah.
this idea of who are you, like, I guess that's why I don't worry too much about how people view me anymore, because I know that if I can get this documentation of my life out there, then everyone will see the real me, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because you're not relying so much on like some kind of a story or like some random memories that you keep remembering in your head, because if you document stuff, then there's like tangible evidence, right? And so
Yeah,
if you can align the evidence in a way to make a story, that is a much more convincing and real story than, you know, whatever you say about yourself, or whatever you feel on like
yeah,
some random day. So yeah.
yeah. I think it's pretty logical, especially these days when you have access to camcorders pretty cheaply, and cameras have been around a long time. And I always wonder, like, why do people take all these pictures of things if they're not going to do something with them?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of meaningless. And there's been like studies that like when you take a picture or record a concert, it's like most of these people, they don't even watch their recordings after they're done, uh, or they just post on Facebook to like show off, and then it's like after when you're recording the concert or whatever, you're not even enjoying the actual experience. So it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, yeah, that's something I have struggled with sometimes when I do like record things. It's true that sometimes I feel outside of things that are happening. I feel like I want to like have some memories of this. Like, yeah, I'm gathered here with these people, or I'm going to meet these old friends. It would be nice to have my camera with me. But the moment you like take up this camera or whatever, you do separate yourself a bit from them, and you don't get yourself in there with them. I guess you can ask if someone else want to record, like hand it around so that you get in the picture as well. But it becomes very, it's not very natural. There is like some artificial aspect being imposed on the moment that way. So that is a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
So it's yeah,
It kind of reminds me, like, I think one of your principles in timeless education, um, was to kind of just learn to experience things more instead of focusing on a goal or like an ideal or an image. And I guess literally here taking pictures, like sometimes it's best to just feel things in the moment because the moment is all there is. And then when the moment is gone, you just, let it go with grace or something.
Sometimes I think also, sometimes I mention that, like, I call it receptivity, open receptivity. So that, you take in what happens. The more you are in the moment and you are aware in the moment and receptive to what happens, the more like nourished you feel. You don't, because when you're focused on goals, you're missing out often on what's happening, and that can make you feel very envious of others, and because you don't feel nourished by what you're doing. But I sometimes also say that not just being open to the moment, but also I think it can be good to plan for future enjoyment. And so when I like document things, I sacrifice a little bit of being in the moment, because I know that in the future, I will have moments where I will appreciate these documents, and then I will, get that back that I lost then, sort of.
Yeah. That's an interesting like idea. Like, how do you balance like the present moment with the future? And I think this ties a lot with existentialism and meaning and purpose, because I feel like if you're meaningless and you don't have a purpose, then you don't have to worry about goals or striving for anything, and you can just live in the moment. But also there is a future waiting for you, and you do have some kind of identity. So how do you act in the world? How do you sacrifice the now for the future? And Jordan Peterson has some interesting stuff on that. But yeah, it's really interesting, that idea. It reminds me, this will sound kind of crazy, but it reminds me a lot of Leo and Aquarius, because Leo is the zodiac sign of living in the moment, and then Aquarius is about the future, and the signs are opposites to each other. So it's like, how do you balance the now with the future? And they also have to do a lot with identity, because the sun rules over Leo, and it is identity, and then Aquarius is kind of like all of the possibilities. And if there's all of these possibilities, then the identity could be all of these different ways it could be. So it's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot we can talk about regarding such things, but we have been talking for 90 minutes, so I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
So thank you for having this conversation with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for interviewing me. I was surprised that you wanted to. So
yeah, I've been wanting to interview an Abstractum for a long time. I've actually had 2 previous ones lined up, but they bailed out. One just disappeared. He seemed interested, even in the last email he sent me. He was interested, but I never heard from him again, and that was over a year ago. So you are like the 3rd one I'm contacting, but so I'm really glad that you decided to go along with it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.